The silence meter. João Hélio case get in. Close the door. Where to? Doesn't matter. We're going to Rio. Zona Norte. February 2007. You ever hear about a crime so brutal, so senseless, that an entire nation stopped and wept? Not a mystery, not a conspiracy, just pure, unthinkable evil. February 7, 2007. Wednesday afternoon. Rio de Janeiro. A mother picking up her kids from school. She stops at a red light. Four men approach armed. Carjacking. She gets out. Her daughter gets out. But her 6-year-old son, his seatbelt gets stuck. What happened next is something I can barely say out loud. The carjackers didn't stop to help him. They drove away, with João Hélio Fernandes still inside, still trapped in his seatbelt, being dragged for 7 kilometers through the streets of Rio de Janeiro. Tonight, we're going to Zona Norte. We're going back to February 7th, 2007. We're going to talk about what happens when cruelty has no limits and a child pays the price. You ready? Because this one doesn't have mystery. This one is just horror and grief and a question that haunted Brazil. How could anyone do this to a child? Let me tell you about João Hélio and the 7 kilometers that destroyed a nation. Who was João Hélio? João Hélio Fernandes Viades. Born September 30th, 2000. Rio de Janeiro. 6 years old. First grade. Son of Rosa Fernandes and Ailton Viades. Brother to his 13-year-old sister. Normal kid. Loved soccer. Loved playing with friends. Loved his family. 6 years old. On February 7, 2007, Rosa picked up João Hélio and his sister from school. Normal Wednesday. Normal routine. She was driving them home. João Hélio was in the back seat. Seatbelt fastened. His sister next to him. Rosa was at the wheel. They stopped at a red light in Oswaldo Cruz, Zona Norte, a working-class neighborhood. Busy intersection, middle of the afternoon, and that's when 4 men appeared. February 7, 2007, the carjacking around 5 p.m. 4 armed men approached the car, guns drawn, shouting, get out now." Rosa panicked, opened the door, got out. Her daughter, 13 years old, opened her door, got out. They stood on the sidewalk, terrified. The carjackers jumped in, and then Rosa realized João Hélio was still inside. His seatbelt was jammed. He couldn't get out. She screamed, my son is still in the car." She ran toward the car, tried to open the door. The carjackers ignored her, started the engine. Rosa banged on the window, screaming, begging, "Please, my son. He's just a baby." The carjackers looked at her and drove away. The dragged João Hélio's seatbelt was jammed, but the door had closed. He was trapped, half inside the car, half hanging out. The seatbelt tangled around him, and as the car sped away, João Hélio was dragged. I'm not going to describe this in detail. You don't need the images, but you need to understand, for 7 kilometers over 4 miles, that child was dragged through the streets of Rio de Janeiro, over asphalt, over debris, over curbs. His body was torn apart. Witnesses saw it happening. They screamed. They honked. They tried to flag down the carjackers. Stop. There's a child. The carjackers didn't stop. They kept driving for 7 kilometers, through busy streets, past pedestrians, past other cars, and nobody could stop them. The discovery eventually, the carjackers realized what had happened. They stopped the car, saw João Hélio's body, or what was left of it, tangled in the seatbelt. They panicked, dumped him on the side of the road, drove away. By the time police arrived, João Hélio was dead. He'd been dragged for 7 kilometers. His body was unrecognizable. 6 years old. The investigation, the crime happened in broad daylight. Dozens of witnesses. Police immediately launched a manhunt. Within hours, they had descriptions, license plate, witnesses. Within days, they had arrests. For suspects, Carlos Eduardo D.A. Silva, 20 years old Carlos Jorge Santos, 19 years old Marcos Vinicius Alves, 18 years old Carlos Alberto Santana, 16 years old, all four were involved in the carjacking. All four knew João Hélio was trapped. All four did nothing to stop. The confessions under interrogation, the suspects confessed. They admitted to the carjacking. They admitted they saw João Hélio. They admitted they heard witnesses screaming, but they didn't stop. Why? According to their statements, they were scared of being caught. They didn't think it was that serious. They panicked and just kept driving. They didn't think dragging a 6-year-old for 7 kilometers was that serious. Brazil's reaction to crime made international news. Brazil was paralyzed with grief and rage, protests, vigils, memorials. People left flowers, toys, candles at the site where João Hélio's body was found. His funeral was attended by thousands. The images were heartbreaking. A tiny white coffin. His parents, shattered. The entire nation mourning and demanding justice. The trial began in 2008. All 4 suspects were charged with carjacking, aggravated murder, torture. The sentences: Carlos Eduardo da Silva, 45 years; Carlos Jorge Santos, 39 years; Marcos Vinicius Alves, 39 years; Carlos Alberto Santana. As a minor, he was sent to a juvenile detention facility. Maximum sentence, 3 years. Let me say that again. Carlos Alberto Santana, one of the 4 people responsible for dragging a 6-year-old to death, served 3 years in juvenile detention, released at age 19. Free. The public outrage. Brazil exploded. 3 years for participating in the torture and murder of a child. Protests, petitions, demands for justice reform. But Brazilian law is clear. Minors, even those who commit heinous crimes, can only be sentenced to a maximum of 3 years in a juvenile facility. No exceptions. Carlos Alberto walked free in 2010, and João Hélio is still dead. What happened to the killers? Carlos Eduardo da Silva, serving his sentence, still in prison as of 2024. Carlos Jorge Santos, serving his sentence, eligible for parole in the 2030s. Marcos Vinicius Alves, serving his sentence, eligible for parole in the 2030s. Carlos Alberto Santana, released in 2010 after serving 3 years. Some reports say he returned to criminal activity. Others say he's tried to stay out of trouble. Either way, he's free. The legacy João Hélio's case changed Brazil. It reignited debates about juvenile sentencing laws, criminal responsibility, car security, public safety. In Rio de Janeiro in 2012, Brazil passed tougher laws on carjacking, increased penalties, mandatory minimums. But nothing brought João Hélio back. Nothing eased his parents' pain, and nothing could erase the 7 kilometers. Theories: there's no mystery here. We know what happened. We know who did it. But let's talk about the why and the system. Theory 1. Panic and stupidity. The carjackers were young, reckless, high on adrenaline. They saw João Hélio, heard the screaming, but they panicked, thought if they stopped, they'd be caught. So they kept driving. This theory says it wasn't malice, it was cowardice and stupidity. Problem: 7 kilometers. Multiple opportunities to stop. Witnesses screaming. At some point, panic becomes deliberate. Theory 2. Complete disregard for life. The carjackers didn't care. They saw a child being dragged, and they didn't care. Because in their world, violent, criminal, desensitized, a child's life meant nothing. This theory says the crime reflects a culture of violence where human life has no value. Theory 3. Systemic failure. These 4 young men grew up in poverty, surrounded by crime, no opportunities, no education. The system failed them long before they killed João Hélio. This doesn't excuse what they did, but it helps explain how someone becomes capable of such cruelty. The uncomfortable truth: Brazil's inequality, violence, and lack of social support create criminals. João Hélio paid the price for systemic failure. Theory 4. Juvenile justice is broken. Carlos Alberto was 16, served 3 years, released. That's not justice. That's a system that prioritizes the rights of perpetrators over the lives of victims. Brazil's juvenile laws were written with rehabilitation in mind. But what rehabilitation is possible for someone who participated in dragging a child to death? The unanswered question, should Brazil change its juvenile sentencing laws? Could this crime have been prevented? What accountability do we have to victims' families? How do we balance justice and rehabilitation? What does justice look like for João Hélio? 3 of the killers are in prison. 1 is free, and João Hélio is gone. Closing, we're here. Look, I don't know how to end this one, because there's no good ending. João Hélio Fernandes was 6 years old. He was in the car with his mom and sister. A carjacking. His seatbelt jammed, and 4 men dragged him to death for 7 kilometers through the streets of Rio de Janeiro. While people watched, while people screamed, while his mother collapsed in the street, knowing her son was dying. 3 of the killers got decades in prison. 1 got 3 years. Is that justice? I don't know. But I know this. João Hélio didn't get a choice. He didn't get to grow up. He didn't get to play soccer, go to school, fall in love, have kids. He got 7 kilometers of agony, and then he died. His parents, Rosa and Hélio, never recover. Nobody recovers from that. You don't move on from watching your 6-year-old dragged to death. You just survive. The meter's off. Rio's still loud, still chaotic. But somewhere in Zona Norte, there's a memorial. Flowers, toys, candles. For João Hélio, 6 years old, gone for over 17 years, but not forgotten. There's an ancient truth that says children are precious, sacred, innocent, to be protected. To harm a child is to violate something fundamental in the universe. João Hélio was 6 years old. He trusted his mom to keep him safe. He was in a car seat, buckled in, doing what kids do, existing, trusting, living, and 4 men dragged him to death. There's a principle woven into existence, that evil is real, that cruelty exists, that some acts are so heinous they defy comprehension. I don't understand how anyone could do this. I don't understand how you see a child being dragged here, the screaming, see the blood, and keep driving. I don't understand how you live with that. But they did it, and now they have to live with it. There's a warning in ancient wisdom that those who harm children face the severest judgment, that their guilt is unshakable, that they will answer for it. 3 of João Hélio's killers are in prison. 1 is free. Do they think about him? Do they see his face? Do they hear his screams? Or have they convinced themselves it wasn't their fault, that it was an accident, that they didn't mean it? I don't know. But I know this. You can't drag a child for 7 kilometers and call it an accident. You can't hear witnesses screaming and claim you didn't know. You can't walk free after 3 years and pretend justice was served. There's a promise in ancient wisdom that the innocent will be vindicated, that justice will come, that those who mourn will be comforted. João Hélio's parents got partial justice, 3 convictions, long sentences, but 1 of the killers walked free after 3 years, and their son is still dead. Is that comfort? Is that justice? I think about João Hélio sometimes, what he felt in those final moments. Did he understand what was happening? Did he call for his mom? Did he suffer the whole time, or did shock take him quickly? I don't know, and I'm grateful I don't know, because the reality is too horrific to bear. We're told that evil will not prevail, that goodness will triumph, that the wicked will face consequences. But in the immediate and the brutal, human reality, evil destroyed João Hélio, and nothing can undo that. Not convictions, not sentences, not laws. He's gone, and all we can do is remember, and refuse to let his name be forgotten. Hey, I don't have a normal call to action for this one, because this isn't a normal case. João Hélio's story is one of the most painful I've ever told, and I don't want to exploit that. But I do want you to remember him, remember his name, remember what happened, remember that he was 6 years old, and that he deserved better. If this case affected you, and I know it did, hit that like button. Not for me, for João Hélio. Subscribe if you want more stories that need to be told, stories that matter, stories that remind us why justice matters. Drop a comment. Tell me what you think about juvenile sentencing laws, about justice, about how we protect or fail to protect children. I read everyone, and if you know someone who's fighting for victims' rights, for justice reform, for child protection. Share this with them. These stories matter. These names matter. I've got more cases, more stories, but none harder than this one. Next time, we're going somewhere different. Until then, hold your loved ones close. Remember João Hélio's name. And remember, some crimes are so evil, they change a nation. This was one of them.